In this video on Dorico 3.0, we are going to be talking about creating chord diagrams in Dorico. You need to set up your player correctly. Let me right-click over here, and we have two menu items we want to deal with here. Chord symbols. Make sure you have it checked correctly. We have show in parts, full score, or the combination therein. And you want it showing for all instruments. If we select hide all instruments, we have no chord symbols. So let's go back into chord symbols. Show for all instruments. You can see we have choices for just rhythm section instruments. And if you have chord symbol and slash regions as well. Let's go for all instruments here. Secondarily, let's go down to chord diagrams. So you can hide them thusly, or you can choose to show them. And then what tuning do you want? You can do standard guitar tuning. Look something like that. You can go back over here and say, you know, there's a huge choice of them. And I really want this to be set up for ukulele. And there you go. However, we're not going to do that. We're going to go navigate back here and select our standard guitar tuning. Once that's set up, you can go into layout options. That's Shift Command or Control L. And I'm going to go to Staves and Systems, Chord Symbols, and make sure this is set to your preferences here, above the player's staves or above the top staff of the system. Let me hit Escape to get out of that. I'm going to go into Note Input Options. Use the key command for that. And that's Shift, Command or Control, and the letter I, Chord Diagrams, which is already selected. And there's some rules and regulations here that are kind of going on that says, hey, you know, we're going to make you pick the maximum highest allowed starting fret for showing these diagrams. And this is for transposing. So if you have a mobile chord form, you know, how far up the neck do you want to have it showing? If you're dealing with the roots of the chords, do you want to omit it or include it? And if you choose to include the root, then you have choices. It must be the lowest note, must not be the lowest note, or it could be any note of the chord. And then if you're dealing with alterations, should we omit the fifth or include it? And if you're dealing with extensions or tensions, do we want to include or omit the ninth? All right, let me hit Escape and get out of this as well. And with that, I think we're sufficiently armed to go ahead and enter some chords. I'm going to delete this one and recreate it here. So let me double click here and get into write mode and hit Escape to get out of note entry. Just selecting that, hitting the delete key. And now with my rest selected, I'm going to go Shift Q. And that's going to give me a popover. And at this point in time, I could type in any chord I wanted. I just want a C chord. So I'm typing that in and hitting return. I'm just going to topically look at chord entry and editing in this video. So we have our chord and our chord diagram. This is Dorico's default choice. It is going to go to the simplest fingering and as close to the nut as possible. If you would like to see what your selection is, you can hold down the Alt or Option key and then letter Q. And as I do this, it'll start rotating through chords, starting at the nut. Here we are at the 3rd fret with a different chord fingering. Fret 5, fret 8, and more on fret 8, fret 10, and finally back to where I started from. Now, if you'd like to see them all, you can go Option or Alt, Shift, and the letter Q. This brings up the Choose Chord Diagram window for an overview. So at this point in time, I could select any chord, click OK, or hit Return. Choice on that. Now, this chord symbol is just subtly different from the previous one in that the first string is not played. You can see the X there. Let me go back in Option, Shift, Q. Again, we could navigate through these. We can also edit these. So let me hit the Edit button here. And this brings us into our Edit Chord Diagram window. You could rename it. You can choose whether it should be allowed to be moved along the neck. If you check this with a chord using open strings, Dorico will accept it if the open strings can be replaced by a barred finger. So let's take a look at what we can do here. An X means, of course, don't play the string. If you'd like the string played, click on the appropriate fret to get the finger dot. We can reassign the dot to any fret simply by clicking on it. Notice we have a readout of the notes up here, including a red F sharp 2, which Dorico thinks is not part of the chord. C4 is Dorico's expression for middle C. If you'd like the string not to be played, click behind the nut or the last fret shown, and you'll get your X. Clicking on an X converts it to a 0, and the converse is true as well. If you want to add a fingering, just click on the fret you'd like it. Let's take a look at doing multiple strings with one finger. Clicking here, and you can see Dorico says, hey, this is not part of the chord again. We're going to go ahead and ignore it. I'm going to click again on that first note, and I get my bar sign there. Dorico is still not happy with that F. Let's go to a G. And let's say that's what we want. And we're not going to move that up the neck because this would be pretty tough to play, replacing the open string with a finger. Now, down here, I have the starting fret. We're going to keep this at 0 because we're including open strings. Now we can choose the frets, extending them or removing them. And this happens to be this area here. So if I subtract one, a little cleaner perhaps, and I can add them as I wish as well. If you've got something you like, you can click Save. If you don't like it, you can revert back to the original. Let's go ahead and hit Save here. And now it did two things. It assigned that chord diagram to this chord. And if we go back in and open up our Choose Chord Diagram window, you can see here it is and it's selected. Now Dorico can be a little bit particular. It won't always save your chord diagram. If it's missing the third, for example, it might create some problems. Let's go ahead and hit Cancel and get out of this. All of what I've done can be done in the engrave mode as well. Simply double click on the chord diagram and this opens up the Edit Chord Diagram window. And we can also go up to the main menu, Engrave Chord Symbols, and we get the same window as well. So let's go ahead and close that out, navigate back to write mode. And once you create a custom chord diagram and save it, you're going to find it in other areas. So for example, if it's a movable chord form and you are looking for a G chord, you might find a repositioned C chord. With this chord selected, we can go down to our Properties panel. We can hide it. Hide root and quality won't work here. It could work if this was a G chord, then we could apply it to the G over B and it would hide the root and quality. Then the alignment overrides the default alignments, which I'll show you in a minute. You can click on this and this is aligned left. We can put it all the way to the right. You can see it jumped over quite a bit. I'm going to do a Command Z to undo. You can show these as emojis. Do you wish to express them that way? See Ionian, let's turn that off. And we'll turn that back off as well. And you have a chord diagram Y offset. So it's changing the difference between the chord diagram and the chord symbol. So let me go ahead and enable that and show you here. And I'll type in a value of, I don't know, 4. Hit return. And you can see the result here. Now what we wanted with the unselected chords, as this is done by selection, these are all set to be aligned. And that's why we have this look now. Let me go ahead and hit delete and type in 0 and get out of that. Okay, let's take a look at some engraving options. So engraving options, Shift, Command or Control, and letter E. And there's a couple of pages we can look at here. So I have chord diagram selected. And you can see in here, boy, we've got a huge list. Now, scale factor might be the most important one for you, relative to the chord symbol. So how big is the diagram versus how big is the chord symbol? This is set at 1. It doesn't take a lot to get a difference here. Let me move this over and I'll type this into a 2. And I'll click out of it, hit apply, and you can see quite the difference here. So let me do an undo. You can see the original, a redo, and you can see that. Take a look at our chord symbols, since we're dealing with chord symbols. Let me navigate down to position, and here is what the global setting is for aligning your chord symbols across the width of the system. You can defeat that by unchecking this. And this is our default horizontal position that we overrode in properties in left, center, and right. Let me go ahead and close this. Another thing we could work with here is going to be found in the Engrave menu, Font Styles. And you'll see, as we navigate through here, we have chord diagram fret number font. And if you wanted, we could do the chord symbol font. So you could choose to make the chord symbols larger, for example. Here there are 11, let's bump everything up a bit to 13 and hit apply, and that changed it. Let me do an undo. And here's a redo. So let's go back into write mode, which is a little easier on the eyes. That's all I want to talk about in this particular video, and we'll catch you on the next video.